They called us the weakest species in the galaxy. They laughed at our failed rockets and broken dreams of reaching the stars. The mighty Space Alliance dismissed us as primitive apes who would never leave our tiny blue world. They were wrong about everything. This is the story of how Earth went from galactic joke to the most feared name whispered in alien war rooms across 1,000 worlds. And it all started with a single act of kindness that changed the fate of the universe forever. When the Space Alliance sent their scout ships to explore the Lu star system, they found mostly empty space. Most planets were dead rocks floating in darkness. Only the third planet showed signs of life. The scouts took many days to study this world. They could barely see through all the metal junk floating around the planet. Someone had been launching things into space, but most had failed and crashed back down as debris. The planet had many different animals and plants. It had lots of water, though the water was dirty with trash. Most interesting was a smart species called Earthlings. These beings had built cities and seemed to be the ones making all the space junk. The scouts counted about 8 billion Earthlings living on their world. After studying them for weeks, the scouts moved on to explore other star systems that had more valuable resources. The Earthlings had learned to fly in space, but all their attempts were failing badly. Scientists in the Alliance thought these creatures would need 400 more years before they could build ships that actually worked. They had never seen such a slow developing race before. Most species that discover space travel make it their main goal to leave their home planet quickly. The Earthlings were different. They seemed happy to stay on their world and keep failing at space travel. Later, a war broke out between two Alliance member races. The strong warrior race, called the Reds, attacked the peaceful race called the Blues. Everyone knew the Blues were innocent, but nobody wanted to fight the powerful Red military. The Reds easily destroyed one blue planet and captured another without much effort. They used their political power to convince other races to kick the Blues out of the Alliance completely. Nobody defended the Blues. They were weak members with no important qualities. They had only 10 billion people and almost no military ships. They owned just a few ships that could travel faster than light. One Alliance senator joked that the Blues were almost as weak as the Earthlings. Someone suggested sending the Blues to the Blue Star system to test how the Earthlings would react. It would be wasteful to send an important race to greet such primitive beings. So 52 large blue ships and many smaller ones, carrying 7 billion blue survivors, jumped to the Blue Star system, with no support and no way back. The ships were packed full of refugees who had nowhere else to go. Nobody would want to help them in their desperate state. Nobody, except the Earthlings. Several weeks later, the second Alliance scout probe reached the system to study how Earthlings and Blues got along. What it found was shocking. The many Earth governments had accepted the Blues into their society. Their planet was busy with construction projects. About half the blue ships were still in orbit, but most of the space debris was mysteriously cleaned up. The probe watchers expected it would take years for Earth to handle so many refugees. Most planets cannot deal with so many newcomers at once. But the Earthlings were different. The Earth people adapted incredibly fast to their new situation. They built new cities at amazing speed using huge machines that could print entire settlements in just weeks. Blue cargo ships that once carried supplies now moved to the asteroid belt to mine materials for building new structures and ships. Most surprising, the Earthlings had learned to copy every piece of blue technology, from energy shields to faster-than-light engines. Earth vehicles that once rolled on wheels now floated using anti-gravity systems. New human-designed ships were built that proved even faster than the original blue vessels. The Alliance had never seen such quick industrial growth. On most planets, it took months to build one ship, and another month to add a faster-than-light drive, which was rare and expensive. Most Alliance ships used slower sunlight engines because faster-than-light drives were too complex and costly for regular use. Only wealthy traders and large warships had them. But on this previously ignored planet, new ships were built and launched every week. Some stayed near Earth, but most immediately used their faster-than-light drives to travel to unknown destinations. Alliance leaders grew worried and curious about this new threat to their way of life. Red generals demanded the right to take whatever made the Earthlings so efficient. The Alliance government agreed and allowed the Reds to assemble a strike force. 100 massive ships, including carriers, destroyers, battleships, and even a planet-killing dreadnought, all packed with enough firepower to conquer any member race. Thousands of smaller ships and troop transports prepared for the invasion of Earth. A single planet against the full Red Fleet should be easy to defeat. There was no way Earth could be ready after only 1 year since the Blues first arrived. Most races would surrender immediately and hope to survive, just like the Blues did after 2 days of fighting. But the Earthlings were different. As soon as the Red Fleet arrived near the system's largest gas giant, a small fleet of 12 cruiser-class ships assembled near Earth to defend their home. As the Reds approached the asteroid belt, the Earth fleet grew steadily until it matched the Red Fleet in size, with more ships jumping in from seemingly nowhere. When the Reds crossed the belt, the human fleet moved to meet them near the small red planet called Mars. When both forces collided, the battle was more even than anyone thought possible. Although blue ships originally had weak shields and weapons, the human cruisers and battleships seemed to match their red enemies, trading devastating attacks. The Red Fleet was reduced to 50 ships, including their flagship dreadnought and a few carriers. They battled against 60 human cruisers and destroyers, all determined to drive back the enemy. Eventually, the Reds decided to retreat. The dreadnought turned away, attempting to jump back to friendly territory before being destroyed. But before it and the remaining ships could escape, the 3 largest human carriers released waves of fast troop transports, nearly 500 each, directed at specific Red targets. While the fleet was trying to flee, they failed to see the transports punch into their ship hulls and lock on, before jumping away to a nearby Allied system. Human Marines were now inside Red ships. The scout probe watched as the human ships hovered near Mars, waiting for the Red ships to return and renew their attack. But the Red ships were gone for good. Never before had the Red Fleet been so damaged that they were forced to retreat. No race's military was capable of standing up to them in direct battle, except the Earthlings. Red leaders were shocked at the defeat. An entire fleet of 3 or 4 million servicemen was reduced to quarter strength by a single planet that had been primitive just 400 days ago. However, communications with the flagship dreadnought were never answered, and the ship was presumed destroyed. This was even worse. One of their prized flagships was gone. Those ships were the best available, and there were only 9 of them in the entire Alliance. The Reds prepared to mobilize their entire military, since the rest of the Alliance refused to help. 4 remaining fleets combined and prepared to meet the survivors of the first attack. On arrival, the fleet admirals were in for a surprise. Their prized dreadnought was not destroyed. It hovered in place, surrounded by its supporting ships, all 4 massive killing cannons charged and ready. This surprised the admirals because it was against protocol to keep dreadnought cannons charged unless ready to fire. Otherwise, the ship's power would drain, shields would fail, and cooling systems would break down. It was too late when the 4 Red admirals realized what had happened. By the time orders went out to take defensive action, charge their own cannons, or abandon ship entirely, all 4 flagships had forgotten to communicate with each other in the chaos. The dreadnought facing them had fired its cannons with perfect accuracy. Each huge blast of energy with the power of 1,000 nuclear bombs hit its target directly. The force wasn't enough to completely destroy the dreadnoughts, but it eliminated their shields, knocked out their main and backup power, and destroyed most of the support ships nearby. As the damaged flagships went dark with all systems offline, the admirals watched through their bridge windows as the 60 human ships from the first battle jumped in, turned toward the dreadnoughts, and launched waves of attack craft. 4 days later, the Reds signed a treaty of unconditional surrender to the newly formed Earth Union. They surrendered all their slaves, gave up their technology, and stated They no longer owned the 5 dreadnoughts that the joint human-blue military now occupied. These ships hovered ominously over the Red Homeworld's capital. Never had anyone stood up to the most powerful force in the galaxy and turned its own weapons against it. Not once had the Reds suffered such a crushing defeat that would never again allow them to be as mighty as they once were. It seemed that nothing would ever be as powerful as they once were, except the Earthlings.